Scaling Up Nation, Trace Blackmore here with some mind-blowing news that'll make your job a whole lot easier. 3 industry titans, Masters Company, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemical have joined forces to create your ultimate one-stop shop for your water treatment needs. We're talking over 60 years of Masters Company's expertise in private label products and cutting-edge test kits. Radical Polymers' game-changing Inisha additives, and MFG Chemical's custom manufacturing prowess. These American companies are bringing you top-notch quality and reliability all under one umbrella. From blending and ultra-concentrates to specialized polymers and custom solutions, they've got you covered. And with multiple AWT Supplier of the Year awards between them, you know you're getting the best of the best. Ready to revolutionize your water treatment game? Head over to scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Every step you take is one they won't have to. The Global 6K for Water is happening Saturday, May 16th. Gather your team to walk, run, or roll 6 kilometers and empower people all over the world with clean water. Whether you join from the treadmill or your favorite trail, you'll join thousands of others around the world in an effort to end the world water crisis. Nearly 4,000 people die every day from diseases related to lack of safe water, sanitation, and hygiene. 1 out of every 11 people lack basic drinking water. Access to clean water changes everything, and you can be a part in that. To find out more, go to scalinguph2o.com/6K. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/6K. The Global 6K for Water, Saturday, May 16th. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, if you are a certified water technologist, are you keeping up with your continuing education units? There are so many people that listen to this podcast that come up to me at AWT conventions, conferences, technical trainings, and they'll say they're having issues renewing their certified water technologist designation. And normally the issue is they didn't start soon enough. So this is a huge accomplishment. When you get your certified water technologist designation, you should be proud because it states that you are among the elite in this industry because you've done things that most people in this industry will not do. One, you've been in the industry for 5 years or the equivalent. You can look on the CWT information to figure out what the equivalents are. And of course, I have a free gift for you around that. If you go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep, you can get where I break down everything you need to know about the CWT and even give you some sample questions and teach you how to answer questions in a better format. All that by going to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. But if you take my overall class, which is designed to give you confidence in taking the exam, one of the things that I say at the end is that you need to start collecting your continuing education units right now because they'll get away from you. You need 25, and 5 a year is very easy. But if you need 25 in the next 2 months, that is not easy. So the biggest advice I give all new CWTs is start collecting those CEUs now. And there's so many things that you can do for CEUs. One is you can go to the technical training seminar and you'll get 15 CEUs from AWT, and it's through AWT, so it's very easy for them to verify. And here's a little hint. If you do anything through AWT, they have a record of it and they can verify it. Those are the easiest CEUs that you can get. Now, they'll also accept things that you do like teaching and attending other events, but they don't have direct records of that. And they need you to help them prove that you learned the things that you said that you learned there. Now, with that, if you do that from the start, you're not going to have any issues. But if you wait, the waiting is the issue. And I just spoke with somebody right before recording this podcast, and that was their issue. And they can't go back in time. They're doing everything they can to get their CEUs in the next 2 months. But boy, 25 CEUs in 2 months, that is a difficult task. It can be done, but it is not an easy task. So don't be that person. And maybe I'm talking to you and you haven't gotten your certification yet. Or maybe you don't practice the same type of water treatment that I do. And there's another certification out there that is perfect for you because it's going to let people know how serious you are about the industry. Well, take the first step on that. Figure out if there's something that you can do to learn the ins and outs of what you're going to have to do to get that certification, and then decide to take the first step. Figure out how you're going to get that certification. Is it a conversation with somebody that's already has it? Is it a conversation with the people that administer it? Is it actually signing up for a course? Is it signing up to take the exam itself? Whatever it is, write it down, put some action behind it, and that's the way that you're going to get it done. There are so many people that come up to me at conferences and say that they got a particular certification because they were nudged on this podcast to do that. Well, Nation, that's the hardest step. You're going to probably have 20 to 50 steps in this process, and all the steps are not the same height. That first step is probably 10 times higher than all the other steps. But I'm telling you, once you take that first step, the other ones become a little bit easier. And the best tip that I can give you on whatever you're trying to set out to accomplish is tell somebody about it, because that gives you some external accountability. And if you have somebody that you meet with on a regular basis, try adding, what are we holding each other accountable for? Not that there's going to be any sort of penalty if you don't do something, but if somebody knows that you said you're going to do something, in addition to letting yourself down if you didn't do it, and then letting the other person down, sometimes that's enough to make a better decision in the moment of choice. Well, Nation, no two boilers are the same. There's differences in design, operating conditions, fuel, the history. Boilers can have their own personality, and that personality can affect troubleshooting when things don't go the way that we expect things to go. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's interview. But before we get there, we have a brand new Words of Water with James.
Hello and welcome to Words of Water with James, the industrial water game show where I give you the definition and you get to guess the word or phrase being defined. Will you rise to the top or get blown down to try your luck another day? There's only one way to find out on Words of Water with James. Today's definition is an expression that describes the terminal settling velocity of small spherical particles falling through a fluid under laminar flow conditions, based on the balance of gravitational, buoyant, and viscous drag forces. Can you guess the word or phrase? The answer is Stokes' Law. Okay, for those who got it correct, step to the right. For those who got it wrong, please step to the left. Settle down, folks. Please exit the basin one at a time. I'm James McDonald, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Words of Water with James.
Well, thank you, James. And Nation, here are a few events that you might want to put on your calendar so you can make sure that you're going to the conference that best suits the needs of your professional development. The 2026 Collection Systems and Stormwater Conference, held by the Water Environment Federation in partnership with the Water Environment Association of Texas, is having their conference July 7th through 11th. This is taking place in the Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. And this brings together professionals responsible for keeping wastewater collection systems and stormwater systems moving safely, sustainably, and efficiently. They're going to have sessions and workshops and a bunch of networking opportunities that if you're in this type of field, you're going to want to check out. And we're, of course, going to have more details for you by going to scalinguph2o.com and going over to our events page. While you're there, also check out the 4th Annual Water Efficiency and Conservation Symposium put on by the Alliance for Water Efficiency, taking place August 4th through 6th in Chicago, Illinois. We're going to have all the information for this show and all the other ones I didn't have a chance to mention on scalinguph2o.com and go over to our events page. You can also put a /events there and it will take you right to there. Whatever you want to do, we've got everything listed out to make going to your next conference or training as easy as possible. Well, Nation, I said we were going to talk about boilers today. Here is that interview. My lab partner today is Cheryl Heiser of TGWT, and of course, that's the Tannin Guys Network. Cheryl, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you, Trace. Happy to be with you today.
Well, we are happy to have you here, and great job at the most recent AWT conference where you presented, I thought, a great paper, and we're going to be talking about that here today. But before we do that, do you mind telling the Scaling Up Nation a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I spent the first part of my career working in the field for a large OEM boiler company called Babcock & Wilcox. I got a lot of great field experience, and it was a really interesting part of my career to start. In the second part of my career, I switched over to conventional water treatment with both a national water treatment company and also a regional service company. And this third and latest part of my career, I guess you could say, is focused on purified tannin boiler treatment, among other green products, which is pretty exciting evolution in my career path. So a little bit on the personal side, which you won't normally hear me talking much about, but I have 2 children. So spare time is sometimes hard to come by, but I do enjoy traveling, cycling. I play soccer. I enjoy skiing in the wintertime, long walks, and just generally trying to stay active.
What got you into the water treatment industry?
Water treatment industry came as a natural transition, I guess. Working in the boiler industry, I was interested in both the fire side and the water side of boilers, and it was just an extension of my boiler experience on the water side. I was definitely interested in the metallurgy with the boilers, but I was also interested in the chemistry on the water side. So it was just a switch, and it was an interesting switch for sure. And having the background on the boilers was definitely helpful.
Cheryl, how did you specifically get involved with boilers?
I started in boilers right from my engineering internship up in the oil sands of northern Alberta. I was placed in utilities department, while some of my chemical engineering classmates got much more exciting assignments in extraction and upgrading and other cool departments. But I ended up crawling through these massive boilers with the NDE inspectors and the boiler specialists, and I found it fascinating. I guess you could say I left and went to water treatment, but boilers were still part of the job. And I'm so happy to be back, focused mostly on boilers. I think the interesting part about boilers, like many things in industry, is that no two boilers are the same. They all have different personalities, they all have their different operating conditions, they all have different problems. So they're all unique and you have to treat them all differently with a fresh perspective. Understanding their design and their function is only part of the story.
Well, I want to ask about your undergrad. So you're a chemie and they're giving out assignments and you get an assignment to go inside a boiler. Tell me about that. How did you even sign up for that?
Well, originally it wasn't a job offer to crawl through boilers, but like I said, my posting was to the utilities department, which was all about water and steam throughout the whole plant. It was a really good way to learn about the whole plant and not just one department because the water and steam goes everywhere. The crawling through boilers part came about because there was turnarounds, there was shutdowns on these units, and they do big, huge maintenance shutdowns where they do inspections, they do repairs, they do, anything that is not working properly with the boiler and they have to check on it. So it was a really good, fascinating experience where I got to see the boilers from the inside out.
Cheryl, you're busy. You've got a ton of stuff to do. Why did you decide, you know what, I'm going to add on to my plate and I'm going to write a paper and present at the AWT conference?
Yes, that's a really good question, Trace. Anyone that has written a paper and done a presentation for AWT know that it's a ton of work. You end up spending a lot of personal time writing, editing, reviewing. But I felt like I had a case study that would really help highlight water treatment for boilers from a different perspective and focus more on the physical, mechanical aspects of boilers for water treaters, but not so much from a water treatment perspective. So I just felt like I had a different perspective to offer, and I felt like it would be a good topic for AWT members to learn about.
Well, speaking of topics, what was the premise of your paper?
So it was really about how to avoid being immediately blamed as the water treater and taking a look at some of the other aspects which may cause boiler tube failures. These are things along the lines of operating conditions, how the operators are operating the boiler, and also include a lot of design issues that may be causing overheat, they may be causing circulation issues, they may be causing carryover into the steam line. In this case study in particular, there was two twin units. There were gas turbines feeding heat recovery steam generators, or HRSGs for short. These were big units. They were 100,000 pounds per hour steam each, producing, and they had superheaters. They were producing steam at 600 psi and 750 degrees Fahrenheit. So the superheater is not something you may run into commonly in the middle market or AWT type market, but it is something you can see in some cases. So it was really about, highlighting the fact that there can be a lot of other issues that lead to boiler tube failures. And if you know enough about your boiler, you can help the customer find other reasons for failures other than just saying, well, it must be the water chemistry, it must be the water treatment.
So, Cheryl, you brought up, and everybody knows it, when you're in doubt, blame the water treater. Your paper does a great job of giving some reasons that it's not always a water treatment problem. You mentioned operating conditions. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, like I mentioned, these boilers had superheaters, which is not always the case. But the distinction between the conditions in water cooled tubes and steam cooled tubes is really important when we're talking about operating conditions. Things like circulation, heat absorption, where the most amount of heat is being absorbed in the boiler, and where different types of problems may occur. For example, the first failures that were discovered in this case study were in the superheater tubes. And the primary cause of those failures was found to be carryover from the steam drum. And what happened was the steam drum internals, which are meant to separate the moisture from the dry steam in the steam drum before it goes into the steam line, were not installed very well. There was large gaps. There was loose parts that allowed a lot of steam to carry over. And eventually, even if you have really good boiler steam quality, you're still going to get some impurities carrying over. And if your steam separation equipment is not doing its job, those impurities are going to end up scaling on the very hottest part of the superheater, which is what happened here. Now, the second set of failures that began to show up were in the generating bank. So this was in the water-cooled space of the boiler before the water goes into the steam drum and out as dry steam. And the problem with these ones was geometry, was really geometry of the generating bank. So in the tubes that were experiencing deposits and then eventually failures, the tubes were coming up and they had a really flat slope going up to the steam drum. So there was a stalling of the flow in that top leg going up towards the steam drum. And what was happening was there was a constant wetting and drying of that bend right at the top of the tube. And eventually that just thinned out. There'd be a magnetite layer would build up and then it would get washed. And then the magnetite layer would build up, it would get washed. So eventually there was just a thinning that occurred and then just a very thin lipped failure that just peeled back like tinfoil. There's some good photos in the paper if you wish to see what that looks like. Those are the two major types of failures that happened in the case study that were related to operating conditions and they were related to design. In addition to the causes that led to the generating bank tube failures, it was also discovered that the normal operating level in the steam drum, the normal water line, was actually 2 inches below center line. And it was discovered that the top row of tubes, where I described they had a really low slope coming into the steam drum, they also were not flooded with water, which did not help the situation with them being dry part of the time and wet part of the time. So that definitely made the problem even worse. We did some operational testing and it was actually recommended to raise the normal operating level of the steam drum a couple inches higher.
So when a customer calls you and says, we have a problem with our boiler, how do you start your process? How do you learn what's wrong?
You have to ask a lot of questions. That's really the basis of a good investigative process. If this is a customer you've been working with for quite some time, you may have some of the answers. But like you said, what's their priority in that period of time? And what kind of problem do they have? It could be a problem related to operation, it could be a problem related to combustion, could be related to water treatment, could be related to controls on the boiler. Do they have a mechanical failure? Is there water leaking out of somewhere? There could be any number of problems. So it's really important to find out what is the problem and where is it coming from.
Now, the old adage is, when in doubt, blame the water treater. So how do you convince the customer that there might be more at stake than just a water treatment problem?
Yeah, so understanding what is inside the boiler or this black box that we just see the outside of is really critical to helping the customer understand that it may be a water problem, but it may be related to something else.
Can you tell us about different inspections and analysis that you use to try to find the root of the problem?
Yeah. So first and foremost, always take lots of photos. Photos are super valuable, especially weeks down the road or months down the road when you're diagnosing something or trying to figure out what happened, pictures tell 1,000 words. And you'll be happy for all the pictures you took during inspections and during issues that may have happened. Boroscope, if you have access to a boroscope to look down the tubes, inside the tubes, that's always super useful. Stuff that happens around bends that we can't see from inside the drum or from a porthole is always very helpful. If this is a boiler you can get inside of, do it. Go inside the boiler because sometimes you can't see everything from a porthole or a manhole. You can actually get inside the boiler, look in the tubes, look at various things inside the boiler that you may not be able to see from just looking through the doorway. The more you can inspect, the better. Even if at first it doesn't seem like that area might be related to the failure or the issue. If deposits are present in the location of the failure, say we had a failure, or in the near vicinity of tubes that have similar geometry, deposit analysis can be very helpful. Metallurgical analysis can also be useful if you are trying to determine if the failure is related to material factors or if it's related to overheat, something on the combustion side. And this involves a specialized testing by a destructive inspection company or a metallurgical engineering company. But sometimes it's really worth the time and expense of getting that done.
You started by saying a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I love taking pictures during boiler inspections. But I learned early on that what will make sense during the inspection, when I then get back to the office, I'll look at the camera and I'll say, what the heck did I just take a picture of? Do you have a method to keep your pictures straight so you can then report on them when you get back to your office?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I've actually used very simple methods. Just, you have a paint marker or something, or you have just a tool that you can scratch something on the side of, you don't want to damage any equipment, but you can scratch something in a layer of film, a label or something. It sounds very simple, but you can say this is the right wall of the steam drum, or this is the front cyclone, or what have you. It's very simplistic methods to identify photos, but it does help when you go back and look at a whole pile of photos that and orientation is really important. Right, if it was in the north end or the south end, or right if it was at the fire end or the cold end, right if it was on the right side of the boiler or the left side of the boiler, and what that means, facing the boiler or facing the fire. Yeah, orientation is super important.
Now, as you're going through the inspection, are you thinking out loud? Are you talking with the customer and letting them know what you're seeing? Or do you rather go back and try to figure things out and simply deliver a report all at one time?
I think that really depends on the circumstance. Depends on the situation. Sometimes you'll go in on behalf of the customer. Sometimes, you might have a really interested operations or engineer personnel that want to come and do the boiler inspection with you. I think that's really a specific question depending on the size of the plant, depending on the situation, depending on what happened, right? Sometimes it may be a case where you go in and look and then, issue a report and issue some findings, maybe suggest that you need to bring in some additional specialized services.
And then what are some specific things that you're looking for during the inspection to try to figure out exactly what's going on?
You really need to take a step back and really look at the geometry of the boiler. For example, is there any discoloration or distortion on any of the tubes? If it's a water tube boiler, like I said, my paper was based on a water tube boiler case. If it's a water tube boiler, the steam drum can be a really good location to look for any clues. For example, is the water line in the steam drum, is it steady and calm? Can you see a steady water line stain on the inside of the drum? Or does it show evidence of a lot of turbulence in the boiler? Does it in coming into the steam drum? Does it show evidence of a lot of uneven circulation, either from side to side or from end to end of the boiler? This can tell you a lot about where the majority of the heat is being absorbed in the boiler. Are there water stains on plates or pans that are supposed to be completely sealed and they're not supposed to be leaking steam? Are there stains near the top of the steam drum on the demister pads or secondary scrubbing internals where there should be mostly dry steam at the very top of the boiler steam drum? Are there any deposits in any of the tubes? This is a huge one, obviously. And if there are deposits, is there a pattern to where these deposits are occurring? Again, orientation is a huge important factor in this. Is there a pattern to where the deposits are located in the drum? And so, yeah, these are all important things. Steam drums are a really good place to look for irregularities or factors that may be causing problems in the rest of the boiler.
Time for a quick break, Scaling Up Nation, as we hear from one of our sponsors. Hey there, Scaling Up Nation. Trace Blackmore here, and today I want to talk to you about a hidden threat lurking in your cooling water systems: biofilm. You know, that slimy stuff that causes all sorts of headaches for us water treaters. But don't worry, because I've got some great news for you. Our friends at AMSA have developed products that are absolute powerhouses when it comes to biofilm control. These aren't your typical products used in biofilm control programs. Oh no, they're much more than that. AMSA's products actually penetrate and break up those stubborn, gluey deposits. This means your biocides can work more effectively and at lower levels too. Plus, it weakens the biofilm matrix, allowing it to be washed away with the flow of water. By incorporating AMSA products into your biofilm control program, you can say goodbye to your concerns about microbiologically influenced corrosion, scale formation, reduced cooling efficiency, and even minimize the risk of Legionella in your systems. So if you want to clean it up and keep it clean, head over to scalinguph2o.com/AMSA to learn more about their innovative biofilm control solutions. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/AMSA. Trust me, your cooling water systems will thank you. A big thank you to our sponsors. They help keep us running. And now, back to the interview. So if it's just a regular boiler inspection, tension is pretty low, but if there's a failure involved, the opposite is true. So tensions are high, emotions are high. How am I going to get this thing working again because I'm down in production? So how do you make sure that you're paying attention to the relationship as well as paying attention to figuring out what's going on with the boiler?
Yeah. I mean, even if you have a good relationship with your customer, stress changes how people react to things. And downtime with a boiler is often very, very expensive, depending on what else is reliant on the boiler. If you developed a level of trust with your customer and they're confident that you understand their system, then they're much more likely to include you when you're trying to figure out what went wrong. They're also more likely to ask for your advice if they trust that you understand their system and their priorities. This is where you can help them keep an open mind, guide an investigative approach rather than a reaction. Obviously, like I said, if downtime usually means a lot of dollars. So there's usually a reaction, but you've got to try to guide a more investigative approach. In the case study that I presented in my paper, the water treater and the water treatment company alongside a boiler specialist, facilitated the involvement of third-party failure analysis and lab services that assisted with the interpretation of the findings. Now, that was a pretty big case, and that was a pretty large impact failure situation. So it may not be that severe or that serious for just, they have one boiler failure and you get it fixed and, game over. You may not need to involve all these additional services, but yeah, just knowing your customer's system and their priorities is really key.
Do you have a story where knowing the system, knowing the people that are running it, knowing how they're running it, really helped protect the boiler and the water treater you were working with?
When you understand your customer's system and you understand what is relying on the steam that your boiler is producing, you're in a better position to make recommendations to improve the operation, whether it be mechanical, operational, whether there's a pretreatment problem, whether there's maybe there is a chemical problem. But the idea is you want to avoid a defensive position so that really helps to facilitate an open exchange with your customer.
Is there something that you know now, doing boiler inspections, working with angry customers, or I just want to get my boiler back online, that you can share with the Scaling Up Nation that might help them in that stressful situation?
Yeah, that's a tough one because every situation is going to be different. Obviously, every personality and people you work with on different customer sites are different. You really need to reassure your customer that you're gonna work with them to find out what went wrong. What's the root cause of the issue? If you just say, "Well, I don't think that was a water treatment problem and I'm going home," it won't elicit a lot of faith and a lot of cooperation. So, put in the time. Sometimes it takes a bit more time investment, but just really reassure your customer that you will see it through and find out what happened, if it was a water treatment issue or if it was, a fire side issue or a combustion issue that caused the problem that they're having.
Let's switch gears slightly because we were talking about your paper for AWT, and we'll be sure to put the paper that you shared with AWT on our show notes page so people can follow along. Now, you're involved in some of the committees with AWT, I think specifically the Women on Water, as well as the Boiler Subcommittee. Can you tell us, one, why you joined those and what you're getting out of it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say my involvement with the committees with AWT is a fairly recent evolution in the last year. My motivation to get involved in the WOW committee was really about growing my network and sharing my experiences with other women in the industry. It was about getting involved, but it was about networking and stuff. I've met so many successful and driven women within AWT, and this has really helped me elevate my game, increase my confidence, and just play bigger. Joining the boiler committee was really about an interest to use my specific knowledge about boilers and field experiences in my past work history to give back to AWT in a technical way, and at the same time keep up with industry trends that other water treatment professionals are seeing. I guess my passion for boilers and my desire to stay challenged has been a good fit in the boiler committee. So I truly believe that my committee involvement with AWT so far has elevated my career and expanded my network for sure. So I'd like to thank my past and current employer for their support in serving on AWT committees because, of course, as you know, it's a volunteer role. I would say it both takes away from your paid job, but it also adds to it in other ways as well, for sure.
So if somebody out there is listening today, maybe they're relatively new in this industry and they're like, well, sure, Cheryl has all this water treatment experience. She knows all these things about boilers. Of course, she would be perfect for the boiler subcommittee. But do you have to have a bunch of experience? Do you have to have all the knowledge that you do? Talk to that individual if you don't mind.
Yeah. If you have an interest in learning about this stuff and getting involved, you do not have to come into a committee volunteer position with the knowledge, all the knowledge that you need, right? You will learn a ton from other members on the committee. You'll get different perspectives. You'll get different ways of working with people on, papers or technical articles. So yeah, no, I would definitely say that, well, even myself, I didn't know what kind of work happened in these committees. So I was really interested in just finding out what kind of resources and what kind of work the boiler committee was doing. So that curiosity was satisfied by joining the committee and making contributions. But I'm also learning a ton of stuff too. So it's great.
Well, thank you for volunteering. I know we would not have all the great resources we do without volunteers like you in the AWT. And we'll be sure to put references so it's very easy for Scaling Up Nation members to find the different committees on AWT and if they do want to investigate more, who to contact for that. So we'll put that right on the show notes page. Another question I have for you, if there is somebody listening and they want to get more information on knowing more about boiler diagnosis, knowing more about trying to figure out what the issues are, where would you point them?
So I guess on a practical level, like I've already talked about, make sure that you know your systems at your customers on a local level. Make sure that you trace their lines, you know what their system looks like, you know what their steam's being used for. Sometimes we go in and do our job and we leave. And just make sure you ask new questions on each visit, right? Each service visit. Trace lines, look at the viewports in the furnace, even if that's not our job. Our job is the water. But look at the furnace, make note of the water level on the sight glass, kind of determine what the norms are at that customer site, right? Because if something changes, then you can have a reason to say, why did the drum level change? It was at this screw last time I was here. Why is it running higher now? Or why is it running lower? And these can also give you clues when they shut down their boiler and they open it up and you have a chance to look inside. As far as literature resources, I guess, I put the Babcock and Wilcox Steam book in my resources, which will probably show up on the show page. I mean, this is the ultimate boiler reference. If you have questions about anything related to boilers, and I'm not plugging it, it is a well known industry resource. Take an interest in the combustion side also, like I said, and find out how this impacts things that might happen on the water side because it can. It can impact heat absorption. It can impact overheat on the tubes. It can impact any number of things. And then, if you're really interested in reading the entirety of my paper, the link for that will also be on the show page.
Well, excellent. Well, I do have a few more questions for you if we advance to the lightning round, if you're ready to do so.
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Question number one. If you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as an industrial water treater, what advice would you give yourself?
That's a pretty funny one, given that my first day in water treatment was an introduction to a fish rendering plant. It was an interesting experience for sure. So I'm surprised that I'm still in the industry after that being included in my first week. But joking aside, I think I would just reassure myself that despite the ups and downs, every win and every challenge leads you to where you're meant to be. And so far, I believe I've reached that place in my current career.
I remember my dad taking me to a turkey rendering plant very early on in my career. I can only imagine how bad a fish rendering plant smells.
Yeah, and then my boss asked if I wanted to have sushi later that evening for dinner, and the answer was no.
Absolutely not. My dad didn't offer me a turkey sandwich, but wow. All right, question number two. What are the last few books that you've read?
First of all, I don't focus enough of my time reading books, reading entire books. I read lots of technical articles, I read lots of reference material, but sitting down and reading a whole book is a bit hard to come by in the past few years. But I did read Gravitas by Lisa Sun. That was a book that I saw on the Women in Chemicals website and mentoring group. And it's a book that we're going to be covering in our one of our WOW book studies this year. It's about the 8 superpower categories that define your confidence language. So, for example, some people tend to be better at leading, taking charge, coaching, planning. Other people tend to fall into knowing, needing all the information before they make a decision, enjoying learning new things. If you like spreadsheets as much as I do, you may fall into this category. And then some of the softer skills, superpowers like giving and believing. So these are the people that enjoy helping, listening, calming, and basically a lot of the nurturing skills that are also super important. Another book I've read this year was a book that we did in the WOW book study in 2025. She Thinks Like a Boss Leadership by Gemma Rodell. This was a functional book about leading teams, differences in the way that males and females communicate, and it was about confidence and about negotiation. So that was a really good book. The third book's a bit further back, and I'm going to say it was probably Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And I can't even say I finished that book, so I should really go back and review it and finish reading it.
We'll make sure to have all of those books listed on our show notes page. When Hollywood makes a movie about your life, who do you want playing Cheryl?
Yeah, so listening to previous podcasts, I never liked this question for myself because I don't watch a ton of movies. I watch a very select list of movies. But I thought about this question for myself, and the first person I came up with was Julia Roberts, as portrayed in Erin Brockovich. She was determined, she was resilient, she was stubborn, which perhaps that's me sometimes, not afraid to speak up on things that are just not right, not ethical. And she was also relatable and human, which is what I strive to be.
All right, final question. What's one thing about our industry you wish more people understood?
Yeah, of course, my answer is related to boilers. I wish more people understood how critical steam boilers are in manufacturing, food production, power generation, heating, and so many other things. We wouldn't have much if we didn't have steam. And a lot of people don't realize what boilers are and what they do and how much input they have in our quality of life and how we live.
We wouldn't have had the Industrial Revolution without the boiler.
Right, exactly.
Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast and giving the boiler the voice that it deserves.
Thank you for having me. I've listened to quite a number of podcasts on the Scaling Up list, and I never thought I would be a guest on one someday. So it was really nice to talk to you.
Nation, it's my hope that today we've given you some insights on how you can do some better troubleshooting. When a customer reports a boiler issue, starting with some structured questions about the operations, combustions, water treatment controls, mechanical conditions, and the like can help avoid blaming the water treater. When in doubt, when anything goes wrong, you blame the water treater. So by making sure that we've got all the information, by making sure we've documented anything that we've seen throughout the operational year, that definitely helps in a moment like this. And I can remember times where I was servicing accounts and I told a client that something was going to happen if they didn't do X. Now, thank goodness I've got great mentors, and they told me that I needed to document anything that I said, or whatever I said never really happened. And I don't think people do that on purpose. I do think people forget, and I do think people get highly emotional when something happens. And a lot of times people are scared it's going to blow back on them. And all of that put together, blame the water treater. Again, I don't think people do that on purpose, but people don't understand exactly what it is that we do. I know we're doing a better job of trying to explain what we do with our customers and how we can help them with what we're noticing in their operations. But a lot of times that's what happens. We get blamed for things that may or may not be anything that we did. So whenever you mention something to a customer, get in the habit of writing that down in the service report. And then hopefully that customer will act on whatever you are asking them to do. But if something happens and they do not, don't forget that you mentioned that. You want to keep mentioning that to try to get that done. And if it doesn't happen and there is an issue, you can point back to something, back to a particular point of time, not to say, aha, I told you so, but to say, I really want to work with you to solve this problem, but we've got to work together. And I mentioned this back this time last year that we were going to have this problem. And what do you know? We do have this issue. Now, I'm thinking of a particular client that I used to have, and we had great dialogue, and they would always invite me if they had some special sort of cake or something in their break room. They were great to talk to, but they weren't so great of doing things that I asked them to do. In fact, they did pretty much nothing that I asked them to do, and anything that got done was something that I did myself. And I did a lot more there than I probably should, but I knew the program wasn't going to last between that last visit to the next visit, so I took some of those things on myself. Now, I did document all those things, but there's some things that need somebody that can change equipment settings or operational settings or something with the equipment that you need somebody else to be brought in for, and that wasn't happening. We weren't getting blowdowns properly. We weren't putting salt into the softener brine tank, and I was the only one that was doing it when I was there, and there was hard water going into the boiler. And I, of course, documented all this. I told them the importance. I even showed them how much money it was costing them if they weren't running a clean boiler. Still, they did not do what I asked them to do. Well, you guessed it, at the next boiler inspection, it did not look the way that they hoped it would look, but it looked exactly the way that I told them it would look if they didn't do the things that they needed to do on a regular basis. They forgot that conversation. Luckily, I documented that conversation, and that took kind of a very not nice conversation that they started out with to, okay, we need to work together. And we had a great dialogue after that. We were able to communicate on all the things that they needed to do. They now saw why it was important. We then figured out how we were going to correct what we saw in the boiler inspection and then keep everything clean. And then they did nothing. Yes, folks, they did absolutely nothing. All of that great stuff, all that great conversation, and they did not follow through with what they said they were going to follow through with. So we decided as a company, we were going to send them a letter and state if they did not do certain things that we didn't think we were the best water treatment provider for them. They got kind of upset with that. and they went with another company. And to my knowledge, that other company is having the same problems that we did. And I know that sounds harsh, but if someone's not going to take your recommendations, if they're not going to do the things that you need them to do, and then at the end of the day, they're going to blame you for what they're not doing, does it really matter if they're paying the invoice? So maybe that's really hard doctrine, but it was a story that came up as I was talking to Cheryl that I was thinking of. I wanted to share that with you. Folks, we are really good at what we do. Hopefully, we're really good at documenting what we do. And I really hope that you've got great clients that do everything that you ask them to do because they understand the importance of what you're asking them to do. But just in case the same thing is happening over and over again and things aren't changing, maybe you need to change something else. Well, one thing you don't need to change is listening to this podcast. We have almost 500 episodes out there for you to devour all around industrial water treatment. So while you're driving from account to account, hopefully you can learn something new that you can try when you park your car and get your test kit out. I sure hope you enjoy listening to this podcast and learning right along with me. And I'm going to have a brand new episode for you next week. Until then, take care, folks. Accelerate your success. Why go it alone when you can get further faster and have more fun doing it? The Rising Tide Mastermind offers a dynamic environment where you can grow professionally and personally while enjoying the journey. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.